For 30 years, my parents poured their hearts into building Sullivan's Kitchen. It was more than a restaurant. It was our family's legacy, our second home, the place where I learned what hard work truly meant. But that night, as we gathered for a special dinner, I watched my brother Derek turn to my sister Eileen with cold eyes and say words that would change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Trust me, you will want to hear how this story ends. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your family's business. My parents, Frank and Margaret Sullivan, opened their restaurant in 1993 with nothing but a small loan, a handful of recipes passed down from my grandmother, and an unshakable belief that good food and honest service would always win. They were right. Sullivan's Kitchen became the heart of our community. Farmers would come in for breakfast before dawn. Families celebrated birthdays and anniversaries in our private dining room. Couples had their first dates at the corner booth by the window. I am Marcus, the oldest of 3 children. After me came Derek, 4 years younger, and then Eileen, 6 years my junior. Growing up, we all worked in the restaurant in some capacity. I bussed tables through high school, learned to cook alongside my father, and developed a deep appreciation for everything my parents had built. But when I turned 18, I left for college in Chicago. I studied finance, landed a job at a consulting firm, and built a life far away from Ohio. I visited when I could, but truthfully, I was not around much. Derek took a different path. He was always the charming one, the kid who could talk his way out of any trouble. My parents adored him, saw in him a spark they believed would carry the family business forward. He attended culinary school for 2 semesters before dropping out, claiming he had learned everything he needed. My parents welcomed him back with open arms, convinced he would be their successor. Then there was Eileen. My little sister started working at the restaurant when she was just 16 years old. At first, she washed dishes and swept floors. By 17, she was waiting tables. By 19, she had taught herself bookkeeping and took over managing the accounts. She worked 6 days a week, often opening the restaurant at 5 in the morning and closing it after 11 at night. Eileen knew every supplier by name, remembered every regular customer's favorite order, and could spot a problem with the kitchen equipment before it became a crisis. But here's the thing about Eileen. She was quiet. She never demanded attention or praise. She just did her work day after day, year after year. And because she never made noise, my parents never seemed to notice just how essential she had become. When they talked about the future of Sullivan's Kitchen, they talked about Derek. When they praised someone for keeping things running, they praised Derek. Eileen was just there, invisible, taken for granted like the furniture. I noticed this during my occasional visits home. I would see Eileen working herself to exhaustion while Derek waltzed in late, barked orders at the staff, and then left early to hang out with his friends. I tried to bring it up with my parents once, but they brushed me off. Derek has big ideas, my father said. He is the future of this place. I wanted to argue, but I also felt like I had given up my right to have an opinion when I left for the city. So I stayed quiet, and the imbalance continued. 2 years ago, my parents' health began to decline. My father had a minor heart attack, and my mother was diagnosed with early-onset arthritis that made it painful for her to stand for long periods. They decided to step back from daily operations and handed control of the restaurant to Derek. There was no discussion, no vote, no consideration of Eileen's decade of dedicated service. Derek was simply anointed the new leader because he was the son who had stayed, and because my parents had always believed in him. Derek wasted no time making changes. He hired his girlfriend Tiffany as the new front-of-house manager, even though she had no restaurant experience. He promoted his college buddies to supervisor positions. He pushed Eileen further and further into the background, assigning her tasks that were beneath her abilities. When she protested, he told her to know her place. When she brought concerns to my parents, they told her to be patient and support her brother. Eileen stopped protesting. She just put her head down and kept working, but something in her eyes had changed. There was a determination there that I had never seen before, a quiet fire that was slowly building. The night everything exploded was supposed to be a celebration. My parents had planned a special dinner to commemorate the 30th anniversary of Sullivan's Kitchen. They invited close family friends, longtime employees, and of course all three of their children. I flew in from Chicago, specifically for the occasion, happy for an excuse to see my family and check on the restaurant. Aileen had spent the entire week preparing for the event. She had arranged fresh flowers for every table, coordinated a special menu featuring my mother's most beloved recipes, and personally called every guest to confirm their attendance. When I arrived that afternoon, she was in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on a beautiful cake she had decorated herself. She looked tired, but proud. "This place looks incredible," I told her, giving her a hug. "Thanks, Marcus," she said, managing a small smile. "I just want tonight to be perfect for Mom and Dad." The dinner started beautifully. The dining room was filled with warmth and laughter. Old friends shared stories about the early days of the restaurant. My parents sat at the head of the table, looking genuinely happy for the first time in months. I started to relax, thinking that maybe things were not as bad as I had feared. Then Derek arrived. He was 45 minutes late, strolling in with Tiffany on his arm, like he was a celebrity making an entrance. Tiffany was wearing a dress that was far too formal for the occasion, and Derek had clearly had a few drinks before arriving. He did not apologize for being late. He just dropped into his chair and immediately started complaining about the wine selection. Halfway through the main course, Derek stood up and clinked his glass. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. My father beamed, clearly expecting some kind of heartfelt tribute. "I have an announcement," Derek said, swaying slightly. "As you all know, I have been running this restaurant for the past 2 years, and I have decided it is time for some changes. Big changes." My stomach tightened. I glanced at Aileen, who had gone very still. "First," Derek continued, "I'm going to modernize this place. New menu, new decor, new everything. This old-fashioned comfort food thing is over. We are going upscale." I heard my mother gasp softly. Sullivan's Kitchen was famous for its old-fashioned comfort food. It was what had built our reputation over 3 decades. "Second," Derek said, grinning now, "I am changing the name. From now on, this place will be called Derek's Bistro. It is time for a new generation to leave its mark." The silence in the room was deafening. My father's smile had frozen on his face. My mother looked like she might cry. But Derek was not finished. "And third," he said, putting his arm around Tiffany, "I am making Tiffany a co-owner. She is going to help me take this place to the next level." Aileen spoke up, then her voice quiet but clear. "Derek, do you not think we should discuss this as a family first? These are major decisions." Derek turned to look at her, and the contempt on his face made my blood run cold. "Discuss with you." He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You do not belong here, Aileen. You never did." Tiffany giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. "Maybe you should find a real job somewhere else," she added. "This is a place for people with actual ambition." I was on my feet before I realized it. "That is enough, Derek. You are out of line." Derek waved his hand dismissively. "Stay out of this, Marcus. You left years ago. You do not get a vote." I looked at my parents, waiting for them to say something to defend Aileen to put Derek in his place. But my father was staring at his plate, and my mother was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Neither of them said a word. Aileen stood up slowly. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking, but she held her head high. "Excuse me," she said quietly, and then she walked out of the dining room and into the kitchen. I followed her, immediately pushing through the swinging doors to find her leaning against the stainless steel counter, tears streaming down her face. It was the first time I had seen her cry since she was a child. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I tried so hard. I did everything right. And it does not matter. It never mattered." I pulled her into a hug and held her while she cried. And in that moment, I made a decision. I was not going to let this stand. After Aileen calmed down, we sat together in the empty kitchen, surrounded by the lingering aromas of the dinner she had worked so hard to prepare. I asked her to tell me everything, and she did. For 2 hours she talked while I listened. She told me about Derek's management style, how he screamed at employees until they quit, how he changed suppliers to cheaper options that resulted in lower quality ingredients, how he had alienated loyal customers with his arrogant attitude. She told me about Tiffany's interference, how she treated the staff like servants, and helped herself to cash from the register whenever she felt like it. But the worst revelation was still to come. Eileen pulled out her phone and showed me a spreadsheet she had been secretly maintaining. It detailed every financial transaction she had been able to track over the past 2 years. What I saw made me sick. Derek had been siphoning money from the restaurant's accounts. Not small amounts, but tens of thousands of dollars at a time. He had taken out loans using the restaurant as collateral without my parents' knowledge. He had run up debts with suppliers and then stopped paying them entirely. And just 3 months ago, he had signed a letter of intent to sell Sullivan's Kitchen to a large restaurant group for a fraction of its actual value. How is that possible? I asked, stunned. He does not even own the restaurant. Mom and Dad are still the legal owners. Aileen nodded. I know. The sale cannot go through without their signatures. But Derek has been telling the buyers that he has power of attorney. He has been forging documents, Marcus. He planned to present Mom and Dad with the final paperwork and pressure them into signing before they understood what was happening. I felt a rage building in my chest that I had never experienced before. My own brother had been systematically destroying our family's legacy, lying to our parents, and treating Eileen like she was worthless, all while planning to pocket the proceeds from a sale that would erase 30 years of our parents' hard work. We have to stop him, I said. Aileen wiped her eyes and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was calm, focused, and absolutely determined. I have been preparing for this, she said quietly. I knew this day would come. I just did not know when. She told me that she had been saving money for years, every dollar she could spare from her modest salary. She had taken online courses in business management, accounting, and restaurant operations. She had built relationships with the suppliers and local business owners that Derek had alienated, and she had kept meticulous records of every questionable thing Derek had done. I have almost $80,000 saved, she said. It is not enough to pay off all the debts, but it is a start. I thought about my own savings, the money I had accumulated over years of working in finance. I had been saving for a house, maybe a vacation home someday. But sitting there in that kitchen looking at my little sister who had given everything to this restaurant while asking for nothing in return, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I have another $100,000, I said. Combined with your savings, we can pay off the debts and stop the sale. Eileen stared at me. Marcus, I cannot ask you to do that. You are not asking. I am offering. This is our family's restaurant, Eileen, and you are the one who has been keeping it alive. It is time for that to be recognized. The next morning, Eileen and I met with a lawyer I knew from my work in Chicago. We laid out everything: the forged documents, the unauthorized loans, the secret sale agreement. The lawyer confirmed what Eileen had suspected. Derek had no legal authority to sell the restaurant, and many of his actions constituted fraud. Armed with this information, we went to my parents' house. It was one of the hardest conversations I have ever had. At first, they did not want to believe us. My father kept shaking his head, insisting that Derek would never do such things. My mother cried and asked why we were trying to destroy the family. But the evidence was undeniable. When I showed them the bank statements, the forged documents, the letter of intent for the sale, their resistance crumbled. My father called Derek and demanded he come to the house immediately. When Derek arrived, he was defensive and angry. He denied everything, called Eileen a jealous liar, and accused me of interfering in matters that were none of my business. But when my father placed the evidence on the table, Derek's facade began to crack. You do not understand, he stammered. I was trying to save the restaurant. The investments were supposed to pay off. The sale was going to be good for everyone. good for everyone, my father said, his voice trembling with anger. You were going to sell our life's work without even telling us. You have been stealing from us for years. You humiliated your sister in front of our friends and family. Derek turned to our mother looking for support, but she would not meet his eyes. I am so disappointed in you, she whispered. I do not even know who you are anymore. That afternoon, Eileen and I sat down with our parents and laid out our plan. We would use our combined savings to pay off the restaurant's debts and cancel the pending sale. In exchange, our parents would transfer ownership of Sullivan's Kitchen to Eileen and me. Aileen would become the managing owner running the day-to-day operations. I would serve as a silent partner and financial advisor returning to Chicago, but remaining involved in major decisions. My parents agreed without hesitation. They were tired, heartbroken by Derek's betrayal, and ready to let someone else carry the burden. When they signed the ownership transfer documents, my mother hugged Eileen for a long time. I am so sorry, she said through her tears. I should have seen how much you were doing. I should have protected you. Aileen held her mother and said nothing, but I could see the relief on her face. After all these years, she was finally being seen. The next day, Eileen walked into Sullivan's Kitchen as its new owner. Derek was in the office going through paperwork like nothing had changed. When Aileen informed him that his employment was terminated effective immediately, he laughed. You cannot fire me, he said. This is my restaurant. Eileen placed the ownership documents on the desk in front of him. Not anymore. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings and leave. If you are not gone by then, I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Derek's face went through a remarkable transformation as he read the documents. Disbelief, then anger, then panic, and finally a kind of desperate pleading. You cannot do this to me, he said. I am your brother. This is not fair. Aileen looked at him with an expression that was not angry, not vengeful, but simply done. You were right about one thing, she said quietly. I do not belong here. I belong in charge. Derek left that day and Tiffany with him. He made a scene in the parking lot, screaming threats and promises of lawsuits, but it was all empty noise. He had no legal standing, no money, and no allies left. Within a week, he had left town entirely, and no one knew where he had gone. The first few months were hard. Harder than I expected, even from 700 miles away. Eileen called me almost every night, exhausted and overwhelmed. Some of the staff had been loyal to Derek and quit when he was fired. Suppliers who had been burned by Derek's broken promises were reluctant to work with the restaurant again. There were days when Eileen wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But she did not give up. She never gave up. Slowly, things began to turn around. Aileen reached out personally to every supplier Derek had wronged, apologizing and negotiating new terms. She hired new staff members who shared her vision for the restaurant. She brought back the classic recipes that customers had loved for 30 years, while adding a few new dishes that reflected her own creativity. She renamed the restaurant Sullivan's Legacy, honoring our parents while signaling a new beginning. 6 months after Eileen took over, Sullivan's Legacy turned its first profit under her leadership. A year later, a food critic from Columbus visited and wrote a glowing review that brought in customers from all over the region. My parents started coming by regularly, not to work, but just to sit in their favorite booth and watch their daughter run the restaurant they had built. As for Derek, I heard he eventually reached out to Eileen. He sent a long email apologizing for everything, asking for forgiveness, and requesting a chance to rebuild their relationship. Aileen thought about it for a long time before responding. I forgive you, she wrote back, but I am not ready to have you in my life again. Maybe someday. Not now. It was not a fairy tale ending. Derek did not become a better person overnight. Our family was not magically healed, but Eileen found something more important than revenge or reconciliation. She found peace. She found the freedom that comes from no longer needing validation from people who were never going to give it. I think about that night at the anniversary dinner sometimes. I remember Derek's sneering face, his cruel words, the way our parents sat in silence while he humiliated our sister. And then I think about Eileen standing in that kitchen, taking ownership not just of a restaurant, but of her own worth. She did not wait for anyone to give her permission to succeed. She did not waste time trying to change minds that did not want to be changed. She simply did the work, built her case, and when the moment came, she was ready. That is the lesson I took from all of this. You cannot control how other people see you or treat you. You cannot make someone respect you if they have decided not to. But you can control your own actions. You can prepare. You can wait. And when the opportunity comes, you can take back everything that was supposed to be yours all along. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to fight to be recognized by your own family? Have you ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to love you most? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you have not subscribed to this channel yet, go ahead and hit that button so you do not miss our next story. Thank you for being here with me today. I hope wherever you are, whatever challenges you are facing, you remember that your worth is not determined by the people who refuse to see it. You are enough exactly as you are. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.